Good for him. Randy's not here. Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, February 4th. First on our agenda is a presentation on the Central Plaza project.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Jacob Hahn, Deputy City Engineer, and with me today is Louis with Rinderneck Associates, here to give you guys a quick update on the Central Plaza construction progress.
Hi, I'm Louis Ruggio with Rinderneck Associates. That was immediately too many clicks. Okay. Since we were here last, we completed all the canopy work, the rebuild of that. We've gone through all of the site lighting controls and training process there. So that would be all of the light poles, the catenary lighting, the string lights that go between them, all of the perimeter lighting around the depot itself. There's a lot of it, and that everything changes colors. It's very, very bright. We've inside the depot finished the floor polishing and the restrooms themselves. We've got casework in. We'll have the countertop here later this week and get that set in there. Then the depot will be just about wrapped up, ready to turn over I know IT will be in there later this week as well. Isolate refrigeration systems are fully online. Everything was charged before 1/1 of 25, which is what we need to do per code. They're getting ready to boot that system up with Zero Zone here in the next week and a half. Zero Zone is the chiller manufacturer, so they'll provide oversight on that. And then the play structured turf went in last week underneath the play sculpture. Current ongoing items, as of today, we do have an area temped in underneath the depot canopy for depot pavers. We're providing heat for that, and we'll work our way around the building for those. The decorative metal panels are in now. They don't provide a whole lot of shielding. In the summer, they'll look really nice when they have the backer panel behind them. There's very cool patterns that are punched into them. And then the ice loop dasher system, which is going to be here later this month and is a little bit behind where we'd like to be. Upcoming items, we've got the splash pad equipment going in right now on the splash pad itself, and then the water room equipment, the stuff that actually powers it here, coming in later this month. And then we've got the 11th Street construction entrance, which we've got some work down there with the ADA panels and that piece prior to the Broad and Main 6 going. And then as soon as the weather allows, we will get landscaping and plantings in. Site donor signage is finalized and working on getting that procured and out there. And then sculpture, foundations, and lighting. We've got all the lighting ordered, and we're working on figuring out the exact foundations with the design team right now.
Yeah. With that, you can always stay informed with our website link there and view the live feed and get the construction updates. But with that, we'll ask any questions from council.
Looking good. I have a confession to make. Before coming here, I kind of gave myself a guided tour of the depot. It's looking really good in there. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe at the last presentation, we talked about the possibility of having a soft opening for the ice loop at the end of January. Mm-hmm. And so is there any anticipation that is going to be open to the public at all this year? Is that weather dependent, and can you also kind of tell us what caused that delay from end of January to whatever it may be in the future?
If you want to start with the latter there. And then
Yeah, so as far as the delay goes, we ended up pouring it in 3 separate pours at the suggestion of the designer of the loop. Initially, it was going to be done in 1 pour, and so we spread that out. And then we in December we did have to delay a pour 1 week, and then we have a 30-day cure period before we can go on it. Okay. And so we had to have everything covered with heat for those 30 days. And that was where we were getting our January date for end of January to have everything ready. And so then that pushed it out till the end of January. We could take the blankets off themselves. And now we ran into a snag with the dasher rail system, which is the handrail system that goes around the ice loop. We do have final sign off on that as of 2 weeks ago. And so that'll be here this month. We had most of that fabricated in December, and there was an issue that popped up with the design team that they found on some of the drawings. So we are behind where we would like to be. We're a full month behind the ice loop, where we would like to be right now.
So do we anticipate that having any soft opening at all this winter?
So currently, right now, what we're anticipating is hopefully by the end of February into early March is beginning our first test pour of the ice loop
Okay.
with our ice consultant from there. And then with that, we've worked with our team that they're actually going to provide us with another ice loop install and training next fall before our startup. So our team will be able to have 2 hands-on trainings throughout this with this delay. And but we are at this time not anticipating a soft opening.
That doesn't surprise me. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Jake, thanks for, being real clear about that. And just from my own standpoint, I think I corresponded with Seth on this. As I've thought about that, while it may be a simple system, I think the refrigeration system is also complex from the standpoint of you want to go through a very thorough commissioning to make sure it is absolutely coolant tight and gives you the thermal performance that you would expect. So from my vantage point, not being rushed on the ice loop is a prudent thing so that when we really go live, we have no snags. So I just don't view the delay as really a negative thing. It's kind of a desirable, but from the complexity of this project, I'm just happy we have the time to make sure the commissioning goes A-okay.
And to expand on that, as Jake mentioned, our contractors will be providing a full additional training and then professional install for winter of 25 as well. So that was something that we worked out with them. So they owe, as part of that painting of the ice loop, that's a process that I think that's mostly done with ice rinks, like hockey rinks, but that is part of our contract. And so they'll go through that whole piece again with Parks and actually set all the dash rail system again, do it professionally, make sure all the holes are lining up, everything's correct again in the fall. So
We'll go to Will and back to Steve. Yeah.
Same question.
Before you had mentioned the decorative panels, are those the panels, are in the new addition where all the equipment's at? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to see in there all the time? There's going to be
Yeah.
something behind
So,
it? Okay.
Yeah. The decorative panels are what they call 60% openness. And so that's what's required for airflow for the
There,
chiller.
Sure.
So, or for the condenser. So in the summer, we'll have a backer panel that goes in there, which will make the pattern of the panels more obvious.
Okay.
And also will block the condenser.
Gotcha. And then do you have a date for when the fencing is going to be coming down? Like a final date?
I will get you a final date and I will send something out to everybody. Our hope is here at the end of the month. That's our goal.
End of February.
Yes, have everything down.
And then this probably is more of a Seth question, but the skate shack, will that, since there's probably not going to be anything going on up in the park this winter, is that just going to go out to
Yeah,
Lao?
that's just gonna go out to Lao, and we'll have a project just this spring for that placement out there.
Do you know when that's going to be here?
It's
Here.
already here.
Oh, it
It's
is
at
here?
It's at
Okay.
the Public Works
Got it.
facility.
I think I did know that. Never mind. Okay, thank you.
So my mind is already jumping to spring and thinking about all the great events we're gonna have there. So refresh my memory, is this entire plaza area irrigated now? Is it the entire plaza
Yeah.
area?
All the plant pads have irrigation that's already
Yep.
installed.
Fully irrigated?
Mhm.
And so when you're ready to start getting everything ready for grass to grow, is that going to be hydro seeding, sodding, or what is the process that is going to be the best to
So,
do that?
yes, hydro seeding is what is part of our contract, but in talking with Hardscape Solutions, who's going to be providing that,
Yeah.
I think that we might go with sod, just it'll be easier. And it'll look nicer and it'll be instantly available, instantly ready to go, so.
Instant gratification is fantastic. So, no, I understand it, but again, the ground is so compacted, that is obviously going to be a lot of work to get that looking back the way everybody wants it to do. So
Yep.
looking forward to it. Great project. Thank you.
No.
If I could, just for clarification with the fencing, just a friendly reminder that when the fencing does go down, there will still be some fencing along the BM6 project. So just so we remember that there will still be some fencing along there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next item is a presentation from the area ambulance service. Hi, Chief.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I just want to take an opportunity to introduce guests from Area Ambulance Service. This afternoon, we have Keith Rippey and Jennifer Peden on behalf of their organization. So this is just an annual update that we do every year with our partners that have 2080 agreements with the City of Marion. And so they're going to be providing an update on their program for the ambulance service to the City of Marion. So
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Chief said, my name is Jennifer Peden with Area Ambulance Service. I appreciate you taking some time this afternoon. I wanted to start with just a brief background of our organization. While Area has been around since 1971, providing pre-hospital care to the community, it was in January of 2006 that those 5 entities came together to form that 28E cooperative agreement to formalize the provision of EMS services to the region in a mutually beneficial way. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. However, we are tasked with being self-sustaining. We receive no subsidy from anyone. Quick operational overview. Area Ambulance runs on a fiscal year from July 1st through June 30th. So what you see here are total calls for service, starting with fiscal year ending 2020, showing our growth extrapolated through the end of 2025. The red bars indicate the calls that are specific to Marion. These are our total calls for service. So through January 15th, Area runs an average of 88.5 total calls for service every day, with 11 of those originating in Marion, doing 69 transports daily, with 9 of those transports originating in Marion. This slide really depicts the technology behind our deployment and staffing. The top box is a screenshot out of our computer-aided dispatch center. And what this is showing you is 7 years of historical data, and it's predictive. So it's telling us where the next call is likely to drop throughout our service area. The little plus signs on this map are showing the calls for service since midnight, the day that I took this screenshot. And then you can kind of see what we call the shards of glass up there. Those shards of glass are showing us the response area that available ambulance can get to within our response time threshold. So those shards of glass move and change as our ambulances move throughout the response zone. Every 20 weeks, we pull all of that call data out and we map it. That's what's in this bottom box. It's showing you 20 weeks of Sunday's call data. So we do one for every day of the week. Across the bottom are the hours of the day, and up the side there showing how many ambulances that were staffing during those hours of the day. And then the plotted calls, so the light blue are all calls for service, and then that bright pink in the front are the emergency calls for service. So we can use this tool to kind of sample various deployment models, staffing models, so that we're putting the right number of unit hours on the streets to cover the call demand at all times. This is looking at response times in Marion specifically. Priority 11s are life-threatening emergency calls here in Marion. We have a 9-minute response time threshold. This is 9 minutes from the time that the call is received in our comm center until we show up on scene. That's depicted with that red line. Priority 12s are non-life-threatening emergency calls in Marion, and we have a 12-minute response time threshold for those. We measure our response times fractally, meaning that we want to hit all calls for service in those response time thresholds 90% of the time or better. And that's that green line going across there. So you can see historically, we've struggled to hit that 9 minute or 12-minute response time 90% of the time or better. Here in the last couple of months, we've made some good improvements, made some operational adjustments. We've increased the amount of time that we're posting in Marion. So historically, when we're at SSM2, meaning we have 2 available trucks that aren't running calls, one would stay in downtown Cedar Rapids, and then we would pull our other one to kind of the outside of Cedar Rapids here on the Marion side. But we've left that truck further in Marion, which has really helped get to those calls quicker. So every week, we're looking at our exceptions and continuing to make those small operational adjustments so that we can hit that response time threshold more consistently. EMD is emergency medical dispatching. This is some scripted questioning that a caller goes through with the dispatcher if they call 911. And currently, Marion Dispatch does not have the capability to do EMD. So without this code, we have a bit of a translation issue between Marion's communication center and our communication center. And so in meeting with our Marion EMS operations group, the decision was made to respond to all calls for service emergently until first responders can get on scene and downgrade us if that's appropriate. So you can see where we've transitioned to, rather than running the majority of our calls without lights and sirens, we now are running most of them with lights and sirens. This isn't ideal. There's a higher risk to running calls with lights and sirens, but we'll continue to work with the ops group to close that gap. As you know, 2 standalone EDs opened in your community. This has also had an impact to our operations and how we deploy. In August, St. Luke's opened theirs on Armour Drive. Since it opened, we've transported 277 patients into that ED and another 353 out down to the main campus mostly. And in December, Cat's Drive is where Mercy opens theirs. And since they opened, we've done 85 into the ED and 175 out. We work very closely with the staff at both facilities to make sure that the patients that are coming out are not the patients that we're taking in. We certainly don't want those individuals to have double transports. So most of the time, those patients coming out are patients that have arrived private vehicle, gone on their own, and then have been designated as better candidates for the main campuses. But they've kept us very busy. Our board approved a new post. We're very excited about this. This is going to be right next to that Mercy standalone ED here in Marion. $1.5 million project. Construction is going to begin in March. We worked very closely with the city of Marion to make sure that the aesthetic really flows with that facility. So we're excited about that opening soon. Our board also approved the commissioning of Fitch & Associates to do an overall EMS system study for us. They're looking at our response times, our demand, both current and projected. We're looking at how we deploy our ambulances. A couple of the big projects that we want Fitch to help us implement. Industry is really pointing us towards having KPIs and metrics that are outcomes-based, meaning does having an ambulance show up make a difference rather than just getting in your car and driving to the hospital yourself? It's not all about how fast you can get there, but what kind of interventions you're doing. So we want to work with Fitch to help us identify some outcomes-based KPIs that we can start to report on. One of the other big projects that we want Fitch to help us with is considering deploying a hybrid deployment model. Right now, every ambulance that we send out has a paramedic and an EMT on it, so they're all ALS units. However, only about 40% of the calls that we run require that level of pre-hospital care. So trying to be efficient and spread that paramedic resource further, looking at how we can safely deploy both BLS and ALS units in our deployment system. That study is expected to be done here soon in March. And we're really looking forward to the opportunity to take our study and set it down next to the study that's been commissioned here in Marion by PCG. A quick financial overview. These are our budget numbers. We built our budget this year betting on our unit hour cost being $167. So that's how much it costs to put an ALS unit in the system every hour. We staff 149 and a half unit hours every single day. Our budget's built on 61 transports every day, and we net about $400 per transport. So when you do that math, we're showing about a $600 deficit every day. Now, area makes that up. Like I said, we don't receive any subsidies. So we make that up with some very lucrative contracts. ME transports to Ankeny, the Mental Health Access Center, we staff there 24/7, and we do a lot of standby services in the community as well. Some of the capital purchases I wanted to highlight, we added 2 ambulances to our fleet, and we've remounted 3. Bunch of ambulance equipment, power load cots, added 3 SUVs to our fleet, and upgraded some of our portable and mobile radios. So we've added about $2.5 million of capital purchases in the last 12 to 18 months. Lastly, I just wanted to hit on some community partnering here in Marion. So in the last 12 months since we've been here last, we were able to participate in PCG's EMS study here locally. We provided a lot of data. We got to sit in on some of the fire department's accrediting meetings, their initial meetings, which was very helpful to see what's behind that heavy lift that they're going to be working on. Area staffed about 20 community events here in Marion this last year. Fireworks and fireflies is always a big one. Just a couple touch of trucks. We also staffed free of charge about 30 public safety standbys. So anytime there's a fire, we show up, we're there for whoever might need us. Any SRT standbys, things like that. And then I mentioned briefly that Marion EMS operations group. So we meet quarterly. A couple of the things that we've been able to tackle together as a group is we've improved radio communication to kind of help facilitate that tiered response when we're responding to calls here locally. We also have laid our protocols down and kind of gotten those to mirror each other a little bit better. And currently we're talking about some efficiencies in ordering and restocking for the fire department here. And that is all I had. So I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Randy?
Thank you.
I could have predicted Randy would have.
Thank you. I'm gonna have,
It's your area.
I'm gonna have a few questions, so I hope they can be answered by yourself. Could you just explain to us a little bit, one of the questions that I've had, and just so we have transparency on this, how many of our transports from patients, residents, or pickup to the new local hospitals have resulted in a secondary non-ambulance, non-emergency secondary transport because perhaps they shouldn't have gone there? There's a lot of confusion in the community and knowing what these facilities can and can't do. And I've talked to these facilities, and a fair amount of them are retransporting patients that do need an ambulance service to take them back to the primary hospitals because they do not provide that level of care. Can you just give us a little clarity around how many of those that we've seen so far that have resulted in secondary transports?
Sure. Like I said, we are watching that closely for compliance purposes for area. I mean, not only is it not great for your, people to have to go twice, but compliance, we don't want to be billing twice, right? Once into the facility and then once back out. That looks pretty bad for us too. So we do work very closely with both of those facilities to talk every month about how many that we bring in. So I can't speak to any other services that might be transporting into those facilities, but for us, most of the time, we're finding only, I want to say the last month, and I'll get the exact numbers and I can get those to you. I'm happy to share those. The last month, I want to say was like 10 to 15 maybe. But of those 10 to 15, several of them, it was a good thing to transport in because we were able to stabilize a bit more before we made that secondary transport as well. So again, we're looking at it constantly, doing education, not just for our staff, but I think as both of those facilities have gotten up and running, they've had to make sure that they're messaging right for their staff too, to get everybody on the same page. So I'm happy to give those exact numbers though.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. That was just a big question that had been coming up. Also too, in the past, I know the best practices, you folks have billed directly. Now, I'm not sure where a patient gets billed directly versus a carrier gets billed directly. Can you just very high level, do patients still get billed direct for their care and transport through your service, or do you bill the carriers including Medicare?
I'm going to give that answer that everybody hates. It depends, right?
Okay.
So it depends on the carrier. Anytime there's any kind of an insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and we have that information available to us, that's who we're billing. And then based on whatever kind of insurance policy, if there's a deductible or something like that, then the patient may still see a bill. It just depends on what kind of coverage they have. But in every case, when there is another carrier to bill, we bill that carrier.
Okay, very good. I know that was kind of coming up in some of the questions that some of my constituents have been having about the transportation. Can you tell us a little bit what our numbers were? And this may be for Chief Tom. Are our numbers pretty level, or have they increased or decreased where our staffed paramedics are assisting in transports either to our local facility or downtown to the main facilities? Can you tell us where we're at with that, if our participation levels have increased or decreased?
So there were a couple questions in there. The first one I'll answer is the latter side of your. So yes, anytime in the field, if a patient's level of stability requires an additional set of hands in the back of the ambulance, we are absolutely willing to support that transport to provide the best level of care possible. And that is something that we work with area on. So if we ride down to the hospital with them, we'll go back and bring them back to the city. So yes, we are still doing that. In regards to the frequency in which that occurs compared to historically, the call volume in Marion is increasing at about 3 to 4% approximately every year is what we've seen over the last couple of years. So I don't know if that answers all of your questions.
It does, yes, thank you. And I was looking at it from a couple different angles. One is by having the two facilities in town now, I know the transport time is obviously down. Was a little bit more directive to curiosity to see, in the past, we had to provide our own support staff because maybe there was an ambulance that wasn't properly staffed with enough medical or enough personnel, and we had to put on, our staff to facilitate, getting them to that destination. So I was just kind of curious where we were just in the ballpark. I know I can drill down onto these in a private conversation, but I was just kind of look to see where our participation of paramedics was, if we're staying level or if we're seeing a decrease in that.
So shortly after I started, and I think this would have been 2023. So before I came, we were housing an area ambulance at Fire Station 1. And if there was a response challenge, we would staff that apparatus and respond to calls utilizing their ambulance. That is no longer the case. They've through a mutual agreement, that ambulance is back with area, and they are deploying, and we are providing the first responder component only. So we do provide first responder with advanced life support capability, which is paramedic level service with the fire department.
Great, thank you for that. You'd mentioned that the priority level is 9 minutes response time. Is there a national industry standard that we go by, or is there a benchmark by per capita or square miles? Can you tell us a little bit as to 9 minutes seems a little lengthy in my timeline when I know we can get a multi-1,000-pound truck out to our response, to our residents in 4 minutes. Can you just talk a little bit about what is our goal, what is our objective, and where we sit nationally by standards?
Great, thank you. Just to clarify, our average response time is probably more in that 4 to 5 minute time frame.
Okay.
When we talk about 9 minutes or less, 90% of the time, that's that fractile. So we're talking about our entire service area. So the farthest outreach is, we still want to make that 9 minute threshold. So our average response time is much better than 9 minutes. So there's just that. When it comes to why 9 minutes, there is a national number. This 9 and 12 minutes predates my time at area, and I've been at area for 20 years. And that's one of the things that we really wanted Fitch and Associates to kind of weigh in on and help give us some guidance. Is that still a good measurement? Is that still what we need to be looking at because of our population, our service area, and so forth? So we'll have some more information on that for sure.
Great, thank you. My last question is, and I'll just at this point say thank you. Thank you for your collaboration with the city. These are very important services. I've been on the other side of this as a firefighter as well too in the past. And so these are critical, especially with our number of our transitional facilities and our later in life facilities when we have numbers by volumes and we all know that our call volume, the majority of ambulance calls are between 5 and 7 in the morning, and that's when people are waking up. People don't realize when most medical calls are needed. So we appreciate that. And that leads me into the last comment, and that's just I appreciate your willingness to share information with us. I know that we're both working on reports at the same time. They're very much needed. As you well know, we're very data driven in our community. Bringing forward the details from the past, figuring out where we're at today and where we need to go in the future. So just a closing comment. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that information and being a conduit of helping us out so that we can help you out and ultimately it helps our residents out. So thank you with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Grant.
I think you mentioned that you were going to be moving to an ALS, BLS hybrid response model.
It's one of the aspects that we're asking Fitch to look at for us and help
Okay.
us determine if that's going to be viable and how we can do that safely.
So give me a little bit of context of what that looks like versus what we're doing today.
Sure. 100% of the ambulances today are deployed with a minimum of one paramedic. Sometimes it's two paramedics, sometimes it's one paramedic, one EMT. However, we know with our data, because data is everything, that about 40% of the calls that we respond to actually require that level of care. There's a national shortage of paramedics. We could put more unit hours on the street today if I had enough paramedics to do it. Paramedics are now working in the EDs. They are quite the commodity. So one of the things that's starting to happen across the nation are these hybrid models, specifically in urban settings where we're running a lot of calls. I can't speak to exactly what that would look like because so many of them are specific to the needs of those communities that they're operating in. Sometimes it's a paramedic in a sprint vehicle, they call it. So once the BLS unit gets on scene, if for some reason we miscued on the call taking and an ALS resource is needed, then that paramedic can respond in a sprint vehicle. There's a lot of different models, which is why we wanted the experts to come in and help us talk about how we could do that.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gage?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So the handout that we have with the response times, the graph, is that all that graph Marion specific?
Yes, with the red and blue
Yeah,
and the
with
green.
the red and blue and the
Yes.
green. I was wondering, and I know you've mentioned a little bit about staffing, but you have that dip from basically July and it doesn't come back up. Both of those lines, red and blue, don't come back up until like November. Was there something specific happening at that time to make kind of those percentages kind of bounce that low? Or is it a combination of the staffing, the distance from where those ambulances might have been staged at the time, or kind of what was the cause of that
It's
bigger
a
dip?
great question. Always lots of variables. The first variable I would point to is the staffing. I mean, it's difficult. We can't just run a truck short, but there's a real safety concern when we start mandating our folks to work, upwards of 60 hours in a week. We start getting worried. So we definitely have some of those concerns, which we have been able to. We increased our recruiting efforts. And so we're looking pretty good staffing wise now. I would still hire 6 paramedics if they walk through the door. But so there's the staffing issue for sure. Some construction that was happening, I think during that time, definitely we didn't make operational adjustments fast enough. So in all transparency, I would say that prior to the last 3 months, we were looking at our exceptions. So exceptions are any time that we don't make that response time. We were analyzing those maybe monthly, maybe every 6 weeks. We're looking at those every week now, just because we saw those dips. Those aren't numbers that we like to report. So every week we're looking at those. And then as you know, you change one thing and then you relook at the data, right? You don't want to change too many things. So we've been making some of those operational improvements and continue to, so we can get more consistent with that 90% threshold.
I appreciate that. I have another question separate, but a follow-up to what you said first. you mentioned like construction and those operational adjustments. Is there anything that cities can do on our end to help you guys be more help us be more proactive and making sure that you guys can do what
That's
you
a
need to do?
Great question. I don't think so. We work with that ops group quarterly. We've only been doing that for maybe a year, 2 years tops. So I think as we continue to utilize that group to help us maybe anticipate and be more proactive about those kinds of projects that are kicking off rather than reactive, I think that will help. But that's about the biggest. I don't think there's anything else really at this point.
Good to know. And then just one more question that's kind of a curiosity. I also sit on the Mental Health Access Center board, so I know you guys are staffed there all the time, but how many like transports are you doing to the Access Center now? Because there was recent legislation, I think, that gets you guys
Yeah.
paid for that now, which wasn't before in the state, but how does that increase your number of transports there then?
Some, again, it's kind of a matter of where we're transporting to, the access center or the hospital. So it hasn't added to our transport numbers. It's just given us one more resource to transport those folks to. But yes, the legislation, we got to be a part of really pushing some of that change, and that was huge. Whereas there was not a funding mechanism, if we transported a patient to that access center, we didn't get paid because there's just not a funding mechanism for it, but we were able to advocate and get that changed. So we were making the transports prior without the funding just because we wanted to match those patients with the right resource. But to have a little bit of funding, it's not much, but it's a little to help offset it has been nice.
Yeah, it helps residents and it helps you guys
Absolutely.
make sure that you're still getting paid for that work, because we'd rather have people that need to be there than of course at the hospital.
Absolutely. And it's a great facility, great resource in the community.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Bill.
Just out of curiosity, when your new location opens up by Mercy on the east side of town, will you still be housing an ambulance over here, just a couple blocks over?
It's a good question. Again, I'm not entirely sure. Another good reason we enrolled Fitch to help us kind of just look at all the data and determine, is that going to be viable? Maybe we go, so we have fixed posts and street corner deployments. So as you're moving through, you might see us sitting in a parking lot. So whether we keep that fixed post or we change that to a street corner deployment post somewhere that's more, just a better place to be, we'll have to see. Again, Fitch will be key in helping us make sure we make a good decision there.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just had a couple things to add, Mayor, if I
Sure.
could.
Absolutely.
First, I just want to let you know that one of the things, the proactive things that we're doing with regards to staffing, we are the only certified ambulance service in the state of Iowa that can run a training center. We've already put through 2 EMT classes, and we're collaborating with the University of Purdue right now to get approval to become a training center for paramedics. And we will start doing paramedics, hopefully by the end of this year, if not sooner. And we've already run through 2 EMT classes as well. We had our first EMT class just shortly, about a month or so ago completed, and that was with attracting people in that are not EMTs. They're not part of our organization. We recruited them from different areas in the community. And so we've got that. And the second thing is to get back to your situation about patient billing, just to let you know, last year we provided almost $900,000 worth of ambulance transportation to folks who had no means to pay. I'm originally from Chicago, but I don't have any shark skin suited violin carrying guys knocking on the door to get an ambulance bill. If folks can't pay, then they can't pay. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate your partnership, and thanks for the update. Thank you. Okay, next item is a discussion regarding a resident proposal that Councilmember Harper is bringing forward, right?
Yes, it's a little dangerous. My name is next to an item that I have some ownership on. Hopefully it's a simple one. In the packet, I had received some written correspondence from Kim Nelson regarding what they do with utility switch cabinets and transformers up in Clear Lake. And that also, because of his awareness of the issue, Frank Sherman shared some pictures with me of some similar treatment of utility boxes out in the Westdale area. And this item and my speaking to it is kind of gratifying, because I made the comment that I was probably the only person that thought switch cabinets and transformers were a thing of beauty. But long ago, at the front end of the plaza project, it was brought to my attention that the utility boxes that are on the northeast end of the plaza were kind of an obstruction relative to just pedestrian motion. But moreover, they just are not attractive for what we're trying to do. So Mr. Nelson had heard me comment on that generally. And obviously, as I said, Frank Sherman provided some pictures of what's out at Westdale, which are, as you see here in the depiction. And I thought, well, let's see what we can do, if it's appropriate, to have perhaps the Arts Council or similarly situated group give us some advice of what can be done. The final thing I'll mention about this is when I was up at the library with Gage last Saturday, Mr. Nelson came up and talked with me, and what he said is that the Clear Lake approach on this is they use wraps, removable wraps, so that if we had any kind of graffiti put on those, they can be changed out a lot easier than trying to refinish a metallic cabinet. So, that's a possibility, and I just thought it was a great idea to try to put a finishing touch on the plaza project. So I'm at the end of anything I know about this, but I would like to have the right group give some treatment to it.
The process would be, if there's a consensus, to have staff look at this, or is that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. If the council's amenable to this request, then yes, the staff's recommendation would be to refer it to the Arts Council and just have them work with staff on kind of going through the things that we'd want to think about. How do we get permission to do it? Would it be a community event to identify? Would it be limited to a geographical area in the uptown or throughout the community? Those types of things we'd want to work on with the respective.
Who do they belong to, the boxes?
A lot of them are going to be the utilities. It could be
So we have to
Mid-Am
get
or
permission from the utilities.
So
And then that would be done through staff and Arts Council. And
that would be just have the advisory board to the city council, kind of work with staff and do the research and come up with some sort of recommendation for council to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that the Arts Council would love to do, and hopefully it won't take too much staff time, because I know they're already busy, but if something that can be referred to the Arts Council to even look into and see what they recommend, maybe something not this busy, but something that's more, that does improve the look of the boxes, but
Aaron, except no butterflies on the box.
it's a little busy. But and anyone opposed to that, to referring it to the Arts Council?
No, I think that's fine.
Steve?
I guess my thought, when I heard Clear Lake mentioned, I go, there's a big difference between Clear Lake having a population of 7,500 and we've got a population of 42,000, and the number of items that need to be considered. So if we start out with that, I certainly would support it on a smaller targeted geographical area, which has the most bang for the buck from how people would notice it. I see it as a bigger challenge in trying to roll this out on a citywide basis. So if the goal is, say, let's have the uptown area or a smaller targeted area, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I could certainly see the community support for something like that.
I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
So, great. Okay. All right.
That's great feedback. We'll take that to the commission and start working.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Grant.
Sure.
Okay, for the next item, I will turn over the meeting to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. Ryan, you have this one?
Yes, thank you, sir. Are you able to run it? Okay. Okay, we are here to provide an update regarding the Marion Municipal Airport. Just a brief history. In 2015, the city purchased the runway. Can you go back, Terrell? Sorry. Let's see. So just this section here is what the city owns. So that's what we're talking about here. So in 2015, the city purchased that portion, that runway. In 2021, November 2021, that's when I started with the city, and we were having conversations with Luxair about amending our lease agreement, the FBO, fixed base operator lease agreement that Luxair and the city had together for the operations and utilization of the runway. And in April of 2022, the city council approved a new lease agreement with Luxair for the operations out at the airfield. One of the main things that lease agreement did was it provided for about a year's time frame within which to allow for the city to analyze what our future involvement with the airport would be. And so in mid 2022 or closer to the fall of 2022, the city council appointed an airport visioning team. This work group was comprised of residents, a couple members of the Marion Municipal Airport Committee, a couple council members, and really to look at and try to get a good understanding of what it would take or what it would cost for the city to operate the entirety of the airport. Went through what's the history, we went through different operating budgets, what that would look like, what that would cost. We looked at the type of structure. Would it be a staff person or would it be outsourced? Went through a series of, it took a look at the 2017 airport layout plan to understand what the updated costs were. And then we did some financial analysis to understand what that would cost, what that would mean to taxpayers and our debt service levy. And in addition to that, we also, the committee, the AVT, put together a survey that we went and sent through the business community via Medco. And all that information was shared, as you know, with the city council in the appropriate setting to inform your decision-making as we went through that. We received our direction, and then earlier, about a year ago, almost to the date, we had staff and myself and Councilman Harper, who's a member of our subcommittee, met with Luxair officials to provide them with information that the city's, after analyzing the operations, that it was our desire to exit the airport at the end of our FBO lease agreement, which is June 30th of 2025. So over the course of the last, or the prior 8 months, those dates you can see on the screen are the dates that we've met with officials from Luxair with the objective of trying to get the runway back to private ownership. So the entirety of the airport would be under private ownership. Luxair was working on forming an investor group. The goal would be to maintain it as a public airport, but under private ownership. Property tax and the cost were some of the big discussion points over these 8 months. So, as you saw in the last slide, January 28th was our last meeting. And that's when we were able to talk to them about the steps and process that we needed to go through to really kind of take this from a concept to reality. And talking with bond counsel, as well as some others, the process is we'd have to publish an RFP. So the purpose of today is to provide an update as to kind of the timing and what the next steps are. So you can see on the screen, we're here today to provide an update to the public and to the council about the steps to go through the RFP process on Thursday's council agenda, there will be a resolution setting the date for the RFP responses and a public hearing. We anticipate publishing the request for proposals on Friday. In that RFP, we will be very clear that the expectation is that the runway continues to function and serve the airport. Responses would be due March 3rd, and then council would have a public hearing and take actions on any proposals that are received on March 6th. With a very high-level update, talk about the next steps right here. If there's any questions from council.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for that update, and thank you everyone that's been involved in the time and attention to get to a solution that's best for all of our residents.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll pass it back to the mayor.
Okay, thank you. On the agenda review, there's one item that's marked, which is E2 on the last page. Prior to discussion of that item, is there anything else on the agenda that anyone would like to discuss separately? Okay, we'll have Nicole with item E2 on the last page.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. So you recall the past two council meetings, we have seen the rezoning request for this property with the final consideration coming before you on Thursday. The preliminary plat is now moving forward. So this development is meant for single-family detached homes. It is just under 45 acres of land to be developed into 109 single-family lots. Again, on the screen, you can see that it'll be done in 7 phases. They start kind of in that north east corner, work somewhat clockwise around the top, head towards kind of the middle of the screen, back up on the west side before finishing on the south side by North 10th Street there. So this does align with that proposed zoning request of the SR2, which is the suburban medium density single family residential zoning district. It's also consistent with our current land use map, which is single family detached residential. It does meet the policies within our current comp plan, such as sidewalks on both sides of the street, an urban cross section, street stubs for future development, and in a couple of slides, I'll kind of point some of those out, along with making sure that the grading review is being done in a way to avoid physical barriers for those future extensions into adjacent properties. So looking at utility and infrastructure, water service will come up North 10th Street. See here. I've got the hand over. So it'll come up North 10th Street to serve the development, as well as a line being taken over to the northwest corner to serve the future, the Linmar property for any future use that they have there. As far as the stormwater management goes, on the screen, the map is showing the ridge lines with the arrows kind of directing you to where that water flow would occur. So up in that north top third of the development, also that water would head towards a proposed basin that would be privately held and maintained. And then this long stretch along that northern line there would be that swale to help prevent water going into the adjacent neighbors to the north in the county. There's another detention basin on site, and that would be this one down in the lower right-hand corner. Eventually, that would be dedicated over to the city and become a part of Lau Park and the art pond. Sanitary sewer is nearby, just kind of south of Hunter's Greenway there. So that'll be brought up from the south, cross over and serve the development as well. Then for the environmentally and historical impact, there aren't any floodways 100 or 500 in this area. The farmhouse is considered historic, being from the 1960s. It does remain on site. and will be incorporated into the development. Layout, North 10th Street will have 2 accesses into the development, shown there in yellow. The 2 green areas on the map show the connections into Lau Park. So with the update to the Lau Park master plan, these do align with what that is presenting as well. So that northern one here would have a driveway into a parking lot with a kind of neighborhood playground, and then trails connecting to the rest of the park. And then the one on the south side would be more of that emergency access that would go behind the amphitheater. And the blue circle at the top, that's our connection into that Linmar property there to the north. So again, this does meet the current comp plan policies of connecting to those adjacent properties. And then sidewalk connections will be, again, on both sides of the street. As far as the property for Lau Park, they won't necessarily be right there on the side of the street like you would see another residential development, but we will have that trail system and we'll have connections that lead from those residential areas into the park overall. As far as the lot configuration goes, larger lots on here are to the north. So they're along that county property, and then there's a handful of them to the south as well. The lots in this area range from about just over 1/4 acre to just over 1/2 acre. So those that are closer to that 1/2 acre mark are gonna be those along the county properties, and then again, those to the south there. With this layout, we don't have any backyards backing up into Lau, which does allow for about 1/2 mile of street frontage showcasing Lau Park, which is something that we don't always get, so it is a nice feature. That being said, with the construction of the street, subdivisions, the developer is required to put in the internal streets, but because part of this will include be along the city property, the city will have an agreement with the developer to pay for 1/2 the cost of that street that borders Lau Park. And then the development does meet the bulk regulations of that SR2 zoning district, again, which is being considered for the final reading on Thursday. For parkland and open space, we don't require that in our code. However, that southern basin is being dedicated again to the city for that art pond to be incorporated in with Lau Park. And then we'll have that entrance off of the public road for additional park amenities. So this kind of shows some of those elements that are pulled from that updated master plan for Lau Park. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval 8-0.
Thank you. Questions?
Nicole, just one quick question to confirm. So does Lau Park border this development on both the entire south side and west side?
Correct.
Both sides, okay.
Yes.
Sarah, go ahead.
I've got a couple. So I'm the one who am not very good at spatial, so I need like comparisons. Can you tell me on these like lot sizes and what's expected for the homes that will be built there? Can you give me a comparable neighborhood and a new development that we've seen in the community? I mean, are these equivalent to like what's off of,
I'd say the ones on the north side and then backing up to the county, and then the ones kind of in the south corner here would probably similar to those in the Silver Ridge development that Bakken is doing, just south of county, Echo Hill Road. Those can be a little larger of a lot. Those along the north, the depth of those are 174 feet. Most newer residential developments range anywhere from about 135 or so to about 160. So those that are kind of the larger lots in this development are definitely a little deeper in size. Otherwise for acreage amount, most of them are hitting about that 1/3 of an acre. So some more in the middle, might be just under that. Some are definitely over that though. It's kind of hard to give you one space in town just
Say most-
because
Did you say most are a 1/3 acre?
most, yep, most newer ones are about that 1/3 acre size.
Okay, and then is there any, as we continue to have this conversation over and over again, but I don't know that it fits because of this, how this is set up or where it's at. What about, there's no plan for sidewalk on 10th Street on those sides of those lots?
So there is sidewalk planned, for the ones that do abut along North 10th Street there. However, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there is a street project that's kind of under consideration as well. And not knowing the timing of that, putting those in is kind of up in the air because we don't want to have someone put them in and rip them out, due to grading.
Okay, because I know this is like a continual conversation on 10th Street and the lack of sidewalks. And now we're jumping up above it. But yet, based on this development and access to the park, this could end up being a continuation on 10th.
Right.
Because we may hear about it. And I understand if it's going to be 3-4 years from now, then we can, we don't need to rip them out again. But if it's going to be 10 years from now, what's that tipping point before we decide we need to start doing something about this?
Yeah, what I would recommend is those that border the 10th Street, because even if you build just that sidewalk and then there's gonna be the gap in that sidewalk, you could defer it and then just have a resolution necessity so that when we go to do it, then we fill in those gaps. But for example, where the old house is, there's still gonna be a gap there until we figure out our sidewalk policy on what we're gonna do with stuff like that.
Okay, that sounds good. And then,
And Sarah, and rest of council, that with the final plat is when any of those sidewalk deferrals would come into play. So that one to the south there, along the art pond would be the last phase. So hopefully North 10th Street, there is more of an urban cross section by then.
Grant?
Nicole, can we back up one slide, please? Yes. So I'm looking at the road on the south end of this development, where it shows on the west future Lau Park connection. What do we envision? How will that road, that street, influence anything that's on the north border of Lau Park? I take it that's just north of the amphitheater?
Correct.
So where does it go? What's the thought about it going further west or further south? What does it, what does it do?
In this kind of lower left image here, it would kind of come down to the south, wrap around and tie into what is existing behind the amphitheater today by
Yeah, and I can help with, when we were doing the master plan update, it was critical when we were talking with the committee and in providing that buffer behind, kind of that backdrop behind the amphitheater. And we're really that space specifically in creating that, the art trail, a place for the art pieces integrated with Prairie, in creating that passageway. It was very desired to have the park frontage road is why versus along West Williams, we have houses backing up to the park in which we have issues from a security standpoint, not being able to see within it, but also just having that access and really looking across the street and seeing the park. But it is very, it was desired to have that park frontage road in creating that access, especially when you get to the western border, where you would have that opportunity for a neighborhood park, much similar to what we have off of Irish Drive.
So is that to say then that connection into the park isn't going to be routinely for live vehicular traffic? It'll be secured at the west end? The new street?
No, at the southwest end, but the northwest end, that goes into, he's saying, into a playground, a parking lot and a playground. On the southwest end, that would become part of the access road that goes behind the
Sure.
amphitheater.
But the one on the southwest wouldn't routinely be at all open.
It's not for through traffic.
I'm sorry,
No.
I can add.
If I go, if I'm on the new street on the south side, driving west, I'm only gonna be able to go so far because it'll be gated off. Is that correct?
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really cut through the park, so that you're gonna pretty much stick to the boundaries of the park.
Okay,
Yep. The only time that would ever be,
Right. okay.
Grant, the only time that would ever be accessed is if there is a fire, if there's a fire going on and we need to get people out. Potentially you could use that, but it's not going to be for an everyday kind of
Emergency access.
only for parks. And then the other thing to the north is really going to be adjacent to this, to these parcels is also land that Linmar has. So for a future school, then that north side, there would be some connection to that.
Okay, that satisfies my
There has been
curiosity.
itching.
Thanks.
I've been itching because I served on this committee. You put us all, I was like, I speak grants sometime. I'm like, I can answer this. I can answer this. You kind of, finally something I'm involved in. I know, no. But they're answered, Grant, because that was a big concern. Because originally the plan had a road that you could drive on. And everybody's like, we don't want to be sitting at this amphitheater or call it Sunrise Yoga, whatever it happens to be, and then have vehicle traffic running back and forth behind it. So it's like unloading equipment, whatever that happens to be. And then that top piece is loads preliminarily into a park.
Plus a part of the donation was that there would not be
Right,
a through street. That was a condition of the donation, so.
yeah. By the way, Sarah, I just love it when we have some fun when we're debating things.
Anyone else? Yeah.
So the old farmhouse area that obviously is not being redeveloped. If someday it does get redeveloped, are utilities and whatnot going to be accessible, or is it being designed to where the utilities will be accessible for that area if it does become single-family houses?
Even if
they
it
eventually
doesn't
take down
become developed and they want to hook on, services are gonna be out front. Mhm.
So it'll just be out front, so that if
They'll have to
eventually
bring in a
those would be
private
lots,
line,
then-
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
What's the average width of the lots?
I believe the minimum width required is 70. I forget, I think these are closer to about 80 to 90. Some of them might be a little skinnier in this, towards the center in a few areas, but I believe most of them about 80 to 90.
Yeah, I mean, this is a discussion for another time, but just a bigger issue, I think, that we look at the width of lots and the minimum widths, because I think we kind of limit the variety and the variation of housing types and styles by the width of the lot, because people, even I think with I think mine is 90, but these smaller widths, you can't have an end load garage. You have to have the 3 garages facing the street, and all the houses start to look the same. I think, we need to look at that just in terms of a bigger planning, not for this case, but future bigger planning. I think process so that we can encourage through our minimum widths people that want to have end load garages, want to vary the look and style of the house a little bit from what's the typical that we see here, which is three garages, half of the house is behind the garage, and 3 gables, and all the neighborhoods start to look the same. So. Anyone else? Okay, anything else on the agenda besides this item? Did you have something to add, Ryan? Oh, you look like you had something to say.
just on the conversation about the lot sizes, I mean, after, once we get the comp plan done and we get the moratorium done, we're off and running on, gonna go through and prioritize the recommendations from the comp plan. So that feedback was very helpful as staff would go through and start to kind of identify a game plan for the future of.
That's what I had in mind, was that we have that coming up, and I think, we should definitely consider and ask the consultants, how do our lot sizes and not necessarily the depths, they're plenty deep, but the widths, how is that limiting and affecting the variety of housing types that we have?
Great feedback.
So, okay. All right, with that, I think we are finished. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it. Anything else to add? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.